Thank you for joining us in another episode of the Poetry of Predicament. This podcast is produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance. Living Resilience exists to offer transformative support and resources to the collapse-aware and collapse-acceptant communities around the world. Our sole purpose is to curate and offer coaching, support groups, courses, and events that assist people in expanding their core skills, competencies, and capacities for facing a troubled, predicament-laden, yet still ineffably miraculous world. All right. It is 7:35 in the morning here on the Pacific coast of the US of A. And it is Saturday, February 24th, session 4 of 8 of Surviving Storms from poet Mark Nepo. And I would call his work soul work. And I was introduced to Mark Nepo's poetry from another soul work path walker, and that's my mentor for grief and soul, Francis Weller. And never fails that in his workshops he will lead out a session in a workshop with some Mark Nepo poetry. And so it's really been a joy to be exposed to Mark's teaching as well. And I don't think it's a dead giveaway that somebody who's strong poet will also have some strength in offering wisdom teachings. And I think Mark does a pretty darn good job. And this particular round, you know, I've bundled in a few suggested chapters, they're brief chapters, for each of our 8 sessions. And to tell you the truth, this was a very mixed set of chapters for me. You know, the first 3 or 4, okay, they were okay. One thing, because there are only 2 of us live on screen today, that's you, Judy, hi, and myself, we really have a lot of leeway to choose our directions for today. And in a moment, I'll stop yakking and excuse me, ask you to check in and ask you if you have any preferences for today. But in anticipation of that conversation, I will just say that I have an immense appreciation for and affinity for a number of Leonard Cohen's songs. And this is the first chapter in this series was about his song, Alleluia. And if you'd like, I could play the version that he spends some time talking about. I just love it. It's as a group coherence practice. It's gorgeous. It always brings me to tears. And I'll finish up by saying there are 2 chapters that I believe that they're the last 2 in this bundle that come about as close as I've seen to a summary from someone whom I've never met, never had a conversation with. But those 2 express in a very vivid way much of the core of this work, the body of work that's behind Living Resilience. Living Resilience is this little online organization that has been created to offer transformative practices, support, and resources to people who are bravely facing human-caused collapse of both Earth and human systems. And I can't imagine any path more important to be walking right now, not necessarily living resilience, but the path of how to expand our capacities to be present in the face of this global scale, this existential scale of challenges and predicaments. And at the next level of resonance, I can't imagine a more important way to go truly to the center of my experience of how to expand my capacities than to go on this path of soul. So those two chapters I really look forward to spending time on. That would be my emphasis. And so, Judy, I'm wondering if you would just briefly check in any way you'd like, and let me know if you have any preferences yourself today.
Well, regarding the preferences of how we go through it, I liked what we did last time, that loose, here's this chapter, and anything jump out at you, because it provided a little bit of a structure. So I would
Yeah,
put 50% vote in for that.
good.
Regarding check-in, like always, I just feel like I bounce all around in my feelings. And what I've been wondering about lately is people, and you're one of them, people who are working in this field. And the people I'm mostly exposed to are trying to bring people to awareness of the predicament. And so I wonder, because some people are very, very passionate and almost aggressive in that, I've just started wondering the motivations
Mhm.
for that, because for me, on one level, once my eyes were opened, it's like, yes, these are times like this, and humanity has continually gone through times where the people involved face their own apocalypse, I guess, if you will.
Mhm.
And I think in some ways that's the only way we can experience it, is that it's us going through this. I can't go through this as humanity
Mhm.
or as the world. It's me or my loved ones or my community or my country, however far I want to go out. And when I'm standing in that place, this is something that human beings have gone through many times, this like annihilation, this fear of annihilation. If not, just all of us are going to die, period. And so I've just started wondering about the people who do this work. Are they, and I'm not asking you, but you certainly can respond, are they trying to help us all do what I think is the necessary work of turning inward and then turning outward, that kind of sacred journey that I find is helpful in the face of the scary stuff?
Mm.
Uh, I've just started wondering, because otherwise, if you're just saying, wake up, people, this bad stuff is barreling down at us, what's the point of waking up if we're not going to do something?
Mhm.
And in the face of this, it seems like the only stuff we can do is the inner work, so we can be strong and resilient and hopefully helpful to the people around us. And I thought it was so interesting. I support and get mailings from the Center for Action and Contemplation,
Mhm.
Richard Rohr's group,
Mhm.
and their theme for this year is resilience.
Mhm.
And I thought, people who are paying attention are all ending up in the same place,
Right.
that this is the challenge. And so yes, I keep looking for the subtitle, The Strength to Meet Adversity.
Mm.
That's what I'm doing.
Would you say your question again that you would like to ask of me.
What is just going through my mind is the people, and I've got a dog running downstairs, the people who are doing the work of raising the alarm
Mhm.
to the poly crisis, whatever the appropriate terms are. What is their real motivation? Like, what is their end game? I'm just curious because I've been exposed more to it, and I don't mean that in any snarky way. It's just I'm really curious about the individual people doing the work, what they're hoping to achieve.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I believe that, I've just, a part of my checking in there was mentioning a few of the common phrases that I use to describe what is this work about. What the purpose of Living Resilience, which is the name of the organization, what's the purpose of Living Resilience? And that is to provide transformative support and resources and practices to people bravely facing human-caused collapse of both Earth and human systems. And, yeah, I've also worked on even shorter than a elevator pitch. That Living Resilience, my commitment to this year and beyond, is that Living Resilience is the inner work of collapse. And it's made quite clear in the introductory course that we call Collateral Beauty, that we post in the community space, that it's really not at all important where one finds themselves on this Paul Chafurka stages of awareness. Are you
Mhm.
familiar with that? Okay. So there's really no arguing, no trying to convince somebody, oh no, you need to be collapse acceptant, or you need to be collapse aware, or, really all that matters is that that a person is at least at that first level beyond business as usual, which is often called one problem, the one problem level. This is again the Paul Chafurka stages of awareness model, which I'll put a link to a descriptive video about it in the show notes of today's episode. And what that level implies is that something is going on in a person's life that rattles them enough to realize maybe things aren't as okay as the business as usual world likes to have us believe all the time, that everything's just fine. Just keep being consumers, as George W. Bush told us to do after 9/11. And that's, of course, that comfort, which is one thing that Mark Nepo talks about in the two chapters that I want to lean on today. Our commitment to our extraordinary level of comfort given to us by the fossil fuel reality has us not want to think about these uncomfortable things. This is a horrid business to be in. I couldn't have a worse topic at the center of my business model. And that's just what I'm committed to. I am not committed to necessarily waking people up, and I'm going to shake every person I meet until they understand how fucked we are and so on. That is not of interest. That a passion was present for me earlier that had me be exuberant and over exuberant beyond what I understood. Like, I didn't know how little passion needed to be present in this conversation to turn people off. But I had my stretch of that in my first year or so of being really engaged with this work. While I was researching my book, it was just blowing my mind what I was running into, to validate what was going on, and in fact find out that what's going on is accelerating and intensifying in an exponential manner. So I'm not in any way interested in convincing anybody or grabbing anybody by the collar and shaking them and, being somehow forceful in having my opinion um, make some impression on them. What I am committed to doing is providing as much clear and sober data as necessary. Um, I really, it's been a few years now since I have taken my consumption of what I call that sober data, the doom scrolling, if you will. Um, there is no usefulness in that. So the people that I love them dearly. I know them, virtually all of them, in the YouTube space, where they do, many of them, daily uh, videos about the next level of doom scrolling information. Or there are a number of people on Twitter that are, or X, that are there all the time, and they're constantly pumping out the next layer of information. That is not what this particular organization and these offerings and these courses and these support groups are about. It's about being able to find the inner resources, access the inner resources, and to create safe environments where we can co-regulate with others, so we can each bring those resources to a circle with each other and find a coherence with each other that will truly give us the space and the grace to be able to be of service to those we love as the anxiety level increases. So let me just stop there and see if does this seem to be addressing what you were asking? Oh, I'm sorry, you are muted.
I had a barking dog. Yes, that's your answer, and I understand it. It's just something I've become curious about because I know why I'm journeying,
Mhm.
but I'm just curious about why other people are trying to get people to journey. So
Yeah, I really do appreciate your question. And if I could just take it one more step, I think this might be a little bit different than what you were asking, but I'm fresh out of quite a deep conversation about the mental health and therapeutic, perhaps, interventions and offerings that are available out in the world for things that are now called eco-anxiety or climate grief and climate depression, and on and on. And I've been clear since a dozen years now. Well, actually, I've been clear long before that, the mental health offerings, for sure, in the USA, I believe in the UK as well, and I can't speak for other countries, but our mental health services are just inadequate to the task. And even before we're talking about existential, global, anything. But then when we add those elements, it's just an extraordinary deficit compared to what is actually needed. And that's a deficit in actual quantity of qualified therapists, in my judgment, who are capable of really holding space in a constructive and nourishing way for someone who's grappling with these large scale issues. I could spend quite a while talking. Yesterday, I was privileged to be in a conversation with a number of psychotherapists who are actually part of a larger conversation that's constellating around a book that will be out this summer about different therapists and different mental health professionals and different alternative mental health professionals who have written a chapter in a book by one of the people who was in this call yesterday. And what I can say is that I feel validated in the countless times I have considered becoming a therapist in my life. And every time I could see this is not what is the best calling for me.
Mm.
What I ended up being involved with for my whole life was transformation-based process work that was adapted to various audiences. One week it might be working with an executive team from a corporation and adapting those methodologies in a way that was appropriate at a level of intensity that was appropriate to what they're doing. The next week I could be working with a group of adults from a community who are working with themselves, working with at-risk youth. And all of us, including a support team that was coordinating and holding the whole space, working on extraordinarily fragile issues of intergenerational trauma, community trauma, individual life elements of trauma, of both the supportive adults and the at-risk youth in an intensive week-long or longer program. There are a lot of alternatives to sit down and talk about it therapy. And there are a lot of folks in my experience who have had for decades now a very much a trauma-informed and the trauma initiated. In other words, they come from an experience in their life of having diffused and healed significant trauma in their lives. These are facilitators that I think can hold far more potent space for people who are troubled now. So that's been my work, that's been my focus, that's been the track I've been on in parallel with some of the most extraordinary facilitators and space holders, if you will, that I've ever met. So I know that that's not what you're asking, but it just feels really important to distinguish what is this work. And what I've just wrap it up by a review of that Paul Chafurka scale. It implies a person as they go up the stages of awareness, they become more aware of and an embodied sense of the interconnectedness of us all and our interconnectedness with the web of life. And then he adds at the very top end, there's also an interconnectedness of all the predicaments that we have created. So it's quite a simple, but for me, a significant scale that we can use just as a self-assessment tool. It's not meant to be the truth, but it gives me a sense of where I position myself. You could self-assess and share about where you position yourself on the scale. And then we can both look at, choose off of a menu of different possibilities, practices that could help us. Mine will be likely different than yours. But the kind of the magic of it is that, yeah, they're different, but we can absolutely sit in circle together and then support one another in a vivid way, even with those differences.
You know what this triggers for me, and I think you and I both are really eager to get to the chapter. I think it was called The Sovereignty of the Seer,
Yes.
because it's almost like every other paragraph, or I'm marking on the outside. And one thing I'm thinking about that now is the notion of so many people have basically given over to experts. And
Mhm.
you're talking about there's not enough therapists, experts, right, to deal
Right.
with it. And the next thing that brought to mind is in some other book, some other course, there was a mention in some African country, some very traumatized African country, that how the problems were addressed was, I can't remember if they called them grandmas. They were just older women. They were not trained. They were older women who would sit and talk and hold hands. So maybe that's what all you people need to be doing, is just letting us all know that we can be the grandmas. We don't need any specific training. We just need to be able to sit and talk and hold hands.
Yeah. I wish it was that simple. And I think in essence, what you just said is true an awful lot of the time. You know, we have become so distant from one another, and so distant from our own core, from where compassion lives in our experience. Often most people are distanced from that core. And so if we could just simply sit with one another and somehow be reconnected to some degree with that core, there is healing there. I'm with you, but I'm also a strong advocate of um, learning to be a space holder, learning to hold space. It, as one increases their progress along that Paul Chafurka scale, you know, the challenges get significant. For instance, I think it's an important piece at the upper levels to be willing to take a look at what are our collective and individual shadows. How is this world influenced by the parts of ourselves that we want to deny or suppress? You know, I would assert that our world is now run by shadow, by collective shadow, and it is what's taking us down, and it will take us down. It will win because it is far more cultivated and refined over years, over decades, or perhaps millennia of practice, unseen. So there's at least a very basic shadow awareness of basic individual and collective shadow dynamics. That would be a really strong piece to learn for somebody to get more and more discernment and ability to be a space holder for other people in their lives, which I consider to be a strong role in whatever little community of pockets of community gather in cities, counties, countries around the world. That's I don't know how to have agency at all if it isn't at that very local neighborhood, small group level from here on. Because I clearly have no agency above that. As soon as it gets into government structures and societal structures and cultural structures, I think we're as polarized as we've ever been on the planet at scale.
Yeah.
One other piece I would suggest is a specific space holder training, and really that only comes out of sitting in circle with people a lot, and having you know, a mentoring situation, and that allows a person to practice and make mistakes and experiment and so on. Yeah, without good space holders, you mentioned the role that the older women in this African community took in healing, and I was involved with one of those youth at risk courses that I mentioned earlier in Hawaii, and a number of courses that I did over the years there. And you know, we were pretty proud of ourselves. We'd come in, the teachers, the coaches, the facilitators, you know, we would come in and be training the adults to do the roles and so on. And we I'm sure I'll just speak for myself. You know, I felt pretty cocky. I'd done this hundreds of times, and I know what I'm doing, and we can make this happen. And the youth came in the door, and you know, we put out our best stuff and held the space best we knew, and nothing, just nothing. It was just basically F you, you know. It was just, ain't nothing gonna move here, and you're lucky I'm still sitting in this chair. And after a couple of days of trying our best and having it fail, we turned to the other adults that we knew were important. They were sitting in the back of the room as kind of advisors and witnesses to the process and so on. And there were the older women in that community, and they called them the aunties. I'm getting goosebumps just remembering this. And the aunties, I hope you excuse my language, but I mean it in the most affectionate way possible. In my neighborhood, we'd call them the aunties, they're the shit. And that just means like, they are top end. You know, this is, get out of their way. The aunties are here. So when there was an alliance created in the room between all of us, the young people, the aunties, and ourselves, just exquisite work got done. You know, beautiful, beautiful, heartrending work got done. So anyway, I've gone on too long. Is it time for us to shift to the sovereignty of the seer?
Yeah, well, how about, you said there was hardly anything that struck you in the early chapters. Let me see if there was for me.
Oh, yeah, I guess you actually requested that. I'm sorry.
I did think the Leonard Cohen part was beautiful.
Yeah.
I've got too many.
And if you have the space for it,
Yes.
I would be happy to play that song for us to listen to it and then to inform the rest of our time. And if you'd rather just get into going through the chapters, I can do that too.
I can go either way.
All right. You know, since it's just you and me and we can do it with however we want, I would love to hear Rufus Wainwright with Choir, 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 a Canadian choir group that does flash mob kind of singing all over Canada and sometimes elsewhere. And so why don't I dig it up?
Okay.
Now it means I've got to find it. Okay, if you'll just give me a thumbs up when I get it going so that it's actually very quiet at the beginning. But you'll know when it's supposed to be making noise. So please just say something or give me a thumbs up if you start to hear it in a little while. Your stuff?
Welcome to the herd, and who has never been to a choir session before? What? What's wrong with you? Why did it take so long?
Please welcome to the stage, Mr. Rufus Wainwright.
Faith is strong, but you needed proof. You saw the bathing on the roof, her beauty and the moonlight overthrew ya. Guide you to a kitchen chair, she touched her hair, and from the lips she grew. Maybe I've been here before. I know this room, I've walked this floor. I used to live alone before I knew ya. Seen your flag on the marble arch. Love is not a fixed remark. This is gold and it's broken. Maybe there's a God above, and all I ever learned from love was how to shoot at someone who outdrew ya. It's not a cry you can hear at night. It's not somebody who's seen the light. It's the cold and it's the broken. Hallelujah.
Well, that's powerful, isn't it?
I've been putting choir pieces into my work long before I started calling the introductory course Collateral Beauty. But I hope you can understand why I would call it Collateral Beauty, because it's my intention to have that quality of beauty. I consider that one of the most gorgeous public singing events I've ever seen. And I'm always moved to tears by their whatever song they're singing. It really doesn't matter. The coherence is so vivid and so just fills the space. Gorgeous. Is there anything more you'd like to say about this song or about what you might be feeling after that?
I just think I don't need to find a particular quote, I guess now, but the notion that that is when the praise needs to come from the brokenness. And I think one of my sadnesses about some of the discussions is, for me, it comes back to questions of faith or explorations of faith, let me put it that way.
Mhm.
And often in mixed company, you can't necessarily talk about faith because people come at it. It's a tragedy to me that churches are where they are, that they're such a part of the problem when they could be a source of such strength.
Yes.
And like to, I need to be at this from a faith journey point of view. And I wish it was easier to talk about.
Yeah.
But I love the notion of the hallelujah, the praise becoming so crucial in the brokenness. So thank you for pointing that. And we'll just skip the rest of the chapter because what more can you do with this song, right? Although
But, yeah,
I did love the mention of a African proverb that was written as, "When death finds you, may it find you alive."
yes,
Struck me. I thought that was amazing.
yes.
And yeah, then we had something about no greater teacher. And I love just the talk about the inner and the outer, that's the work. And he talked about heart work. And one thing that struck me there was that the soul doesn't value one form of care over another. Any act of care will make the soul come alive through us. And since all things are worthy of care and in need of care, any ground of experience we devote ourselves to will brighten our aliveness. So he, oh, and one thing I'll say, as you mentioned, well, I think, he's a poet, but, he's got this bigger thing. I've heard many people talk about the prophets, the Old Testament prophets. What were they? They were poets. They
Yes.
were saying these things poetically. But anyway, I've jumped through a couple chapters. If you want to say anything more before the one about the sovereignty of the seer.
Okay, I'll just flip through my ebook version of the pages for a moment and see if there's anything.
Looking, I'll say one more. I loved in 1,000 Stitches Till Dawn, the endless practice of bringing all we are not into all that we are is how we stitch the world together repeatedly. This is how we meet the days without hiding our truth or pain, and most importantly, our love. I mean, yeah, he's a poet.
And where are you?
That was in the short 1 page, 1,000 Stitches Till Dawn.
Yeah.
He's just amazing.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would have skipped right over it, having even read it a number of times in the past few days. Yeah.
But yeah, you tell me what struck you as so powerful. As I said, those ending chapters were, I mean, what was the point of underlining in some ways
Mm.
because of the richness of all of it?
Well, I'm just taking a slow perusal of secret identities. I think there's a huge amount there, and it feels like a long and more advanced conversation. What I mean by advanced is what I was saying before about the different practices that we make available and choose from in the upper reaches of the Palchafurka stages of awareness. And it's a pretty advanced self-awareness, a level of self-awareness. I go to the questions to walk with in that secret identities. In your journal, describe a time when you felt the need to hide some aspect of who you are. Why was this necessary? What was the cost of hiding who you are? How did you remedy this situation? And let me just go back a little bit and say, I don't think I emphasized or suggested nearly strongly enough that it would be really wise for us to, all of us, have done some journaling with these, what he calls questions to walk with. I think it's very, very valuable, the questions he's chosen, and whether or not they're the right questions for us to engage enough to do some journaling is very different than just sort of giving it a light read over and moving on,
Mhm.
which I think most of us do, just to be really truthful. So this hints to me toward what ends up being a corrosive element at the center of virtually every relationship in our lives if we let it. Who we hide, aspects of ourselves that we hide from others, from family members, from our spouses, from friends, and so on. And most importantly, from ourselves. So I think it's a longer conversation than he gave time for. He didn't have time for it either. I don't think we do here either, but there are certainly spaces in which a deep dive into what has been causal in creating and aggravating our own shadow elements. This is a good place to start. So I guess I'll just say, note for later exploration. And that leads us straight to sovereignty of the seer. And it seems like you also had a big affinity here. So would you start us out and tell me what got you here?
Not the first couple pages. I guess I have felt probably for as long as I was a thinking person, and my only experience is America, but that were really stupid people, that were just a stupid people. And I would look at my father, who was not college educated. He was World War II generation. And I disagreed with him a lot, but he seemed pretty well educated going through high school.
Mhm.
And so something has happened over time where we're not thinkers. And so when I read on, it's about maybe the third page in, I know your pages are different. He was talking about a political scientist saying this: the compulsion to know everything is the road to insanity. People are able to survive in the modern world by learning to distinguish what they must know from what they do not need to know. And then they go on to say, we couldn't live in modern society without putting our trust in a bunch of experts. And I guess I would posit that I'm not the only one who never went that way. I'm not going to say I don't acknowledge that a doctor would know more about what might be going on in my body, but I have always said, why would I listen to what those people say, whoever those people are? If I had a personal theology, it's that we were created to use what we've been given. I always said mind, but now I'm understanding it's also heart. Mind and heart, to understand the life that we're in and do the best we can with it. And we're going to stumble and we're not going to know the answers, but that's our job, is to try to understand and live a good life, whatever that means. And it's up to us to figure it out. And so I see this and it's like, yes, the system, everything has forced or encouraged people to give up their own agency or their own trust in themselves, to step back and be fat and happy, basically fat and happy and stupid. And that sounds maybe really arrogant, but it kind of explained things for me, because yeah, we can't know everything. And so the mechanism is to only look at what we have to function with. And that's why this whole chapter just seemed so powerful to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
What struck you? Why did it mean something to you?
I really resonate with what you've just shared. And so thank you for starting us out. And um, I've been asking very similar questions since I had that kind of rattling moment and realized what I had known about since being a teenager was actually coming true far faster than anything I had imagined through my whole adult life. And so I started to ask questions as I was writing the book, like simple questions, like what got us here? And it seems like what got us here is we forfeited our center. We forfeited our center, and we forfeited our part of that center is our connection with the primary sources of meaning and belonging and relationship in our lives. So deeper self, connection with other people, with earth, and with soul. And I would just go back a couple pages to one of the first things he shared is about that center. And this is where I'm just beside myself. I'm doing my little happy dance inside when he's saying, basically in his own words, we forfeited our center. And he defines center from this very unusual way that I've never heard before, from a Chinese definition, to find the central clue to our moral being, which unites us to the universal order, which they call Chung Yung, that indeed is the highest human attainment. To find the central clue to our moral being, which unites us to the universal order, that indeed is the highest human attainment. And I could not agree more. And what you're just pointing out, what we've defaulted to, is we've handed away all that beauty, all that exquisite core nature that this little definition is saying. This is the good stuff over here. To find the central clue to our moral being, which unites us to the universal order, that center, that is indeed the highest human attainment. So we have forfeited that. In our culture, we have, by being influenced to forfeit it, and volitionally, we've gotten on board that train, evidently a self-terminating train, by giving away that center and our relationship with that center, and a culture which honors that center. We don't honor that center. And I would just jump ahead, I guess, to the next page right next to what you just so beautifully read for us. That, where is it? And I'm not going to remember it off the top of my head.
I wonder if it's just one of the ones I underlined.
I know it will come back as we are talking.
Well, I will outline a couple things then.
Please.
Just a sentence. The concept of willful ignorance then.
It was willful ignorance that I was trying to remember. Beautiful.
The concept of willful ignorance then becomes a modern strategy of survival, which allows for a trust or collusion to exist between ignorance and expertise.
Yeah.
And then a little further, when he introduces the sovereignty of the seer, though, the contrast, And mystics would call this deeper innate sense of knowing the sovereignty of the seer, meaning the innate rights of one who sees, who drinks from, who ingests and inhabits, the rights of one who consumes in the original sense of the word, from the Latin consumere, to take in completely. And then, so the real danger of our age, the real press of society that isolates us, which can be seen everywhere, is the erosion of the sovereignty of the seer. And it just is all so powerful because he is giving an explanation and naming what I've seen and just casually, fat, happy, and dumb. That's not very illustrative, but he names that. And it's something that's always broken my heart. I don't understand, never understood the hidden strategy. Hidden in the strategy of willful ignorance is the want to learn only what is necessary. The discrepancy ensures a gap in our sense of self-worth.
Yeah.
So people numb themselves with drugs and alcohol and computers and mindless shopping because everyone knows something is wrong. And yet.
Yeah. Thank you. You went right to the thing that had popped out of my brain. The only thing I would add to what he's saying here is in addition to our deferral to experts, I actually think that has now flipped. We no longer have any serious regard for experts. What we have a serious regard for and who we defer to now is our tribe, is the people who give us the most agreement for what is roiling inside of us, what by default is left after we've thrown out our curiosity, our authentic curiosity about being alive.
I understand what you're saying, but I'd almost disagree. I think they've found different experts.
Okay.
That are naming that for them. These are the people to listen to, this talk show guy. And I think others of us are saying, those are the wrong experts. You're listening to the wrong experts. You need to listen to our tribe's experts. And by the definition of experts, I'm not claiming that those idols that they're looking at are expert in the old sense of the word, but they're still looking to someone outside of themselves.
Exactly. That is it. Yeah.
And that it's also, I think what these times have done for me is it couldn't be more black and white that that's what people are doing, that they're looking outside. If they stopped and thought about it, what I used to say is, oh my gosh, this other side, the manipulators on the other side have convinced the people who believe in them to work against their own best self-interest.
Mm-hmm.
In really practical ways, not the big picture we're talking about, but that, yeah, let's get rid of Obamacare and Social Security and stuff. And you're going, wait, those programs are helping the people and you're turning them against programs that can help them individually.
Mm-hmm.
Lowering taxes on big business and the rich do not help the followers. So what an act of genius that you can turn people against their own best self-interest.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So this actually, we're in a neighborhood that continues to be part of what I tried to respond to your earlier first question, which was what's motivating you people who are in this field, making content creators in this field. And what's your motivation? What do you want to convince people of? What's your deal? Why? And here it is not about, for me, it is not about providing adversarial content or saying it in a more forceful way and so on. It is not in the content for me in this work. In this work is to offer people an opportunity to explore what is the condition of your center. What is the condition of your presence? What is the condition of your awareness? And invite people to create a baseline for themselves, because we don't have a baseline. I mean, you can't have a baseline if you're so easily convinced to vote against your own best interest, as you just so clearly laid out. Like, that's a country without a baseline. Have a context for what is actually good for being alive, is good for being a country. Yeah, so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because at whatever scale you can mention, on the more local, the better. Whatever local scale we can talk about, it will be positively influenced by a person exploring and then finding for themselves a reminder of what is a baseline for my experience. What is a context for what is healthy and good for myself as a living entity, for my family, and for this community, for the environment. To re-establish the baseline and the context in which we can live and actually be a part of the web of life. So, sounds big and grandiose, but what I've seen time and time again is really, it doesn't take a whole lot for a person to reconnect at these most essential levels. A person could watch that Rufus Wainwright video of that 1,500 people singing and notice in their own body, start to create a baseline for what it feels like when we're in the presence of coherence, rather than in the presence of adversarial polarized argument. It's actually pretty palpable.
Yeah. Well, I think that people don't even examine the question of a good life or happiness or contentment or whatever. I remember again and again in another group I've been in, there was a guy who's up in past you. He's up, I think, in Cottage Grove. And he apparently used to run an organization that was very active in refugee camps in Africa. And I don't really know the auspices, what they were doing, but he was often in Africa in refugee camps. And he said he'd get so depressed every time he came home because he'd be with those people and I don't know, are we talking war-torn countries or famine countries? I'm not really sure what they were refugees from, maybe all of the above. And he said, I would be in those camps in these really dire situations. It's making me cry. And people were smiling and they were interacting and so on and so forth. And he'd come back to this land of plenty and it wasn't here. And And I hear people even in this kind of space, well, you know, at least we're not in those kinds of spaces, those others. And yet maybe those other spaces will handle all this so much better because at some level they're still more human than we are. Or they have the connection to center and so have the connection to each other. I don't know. And that's one of the things I think this scares me most. Not having connections.
I'm wondering,
Go ahead.
no, please. It looks like you're moved, and if I may, I'd like to invite you to just be with your being moved right now, and if there's anything more that emerges that you would like to share out of that, I'd be happy.
Well, I guess that's what scares me most is because I started saying that always all over the place. Once you see this stuff, you never unsee it. So it becomes the overarching framework of your life, right? And then says, so what do I do? What do I do today because of this stuff I can't not unsee? And so I go a lot of places with that, and I don't need to tell you all the places I go and the things I am thinking I should do or think about. But one of the things that scares me in almost every scenario is how human beings will act as things become more dire. And we are already seeing how human beings react as things have become more dire. We're tearing each other apart. And so play that out a little bit more, that the violence becomes even more so. You know, the targeting of the other becomes more so. And that scares me, I think, more than anything.
Yeah. When you first shared the story of the friend who goes to refugee camps and in places where people are so torn away from their homes and their communities, and that they still somehow had more of a sense of connection and more of a sense of coherence and even happiness in that space than people when he came back to the workaday world of the USA. Is that a fair description?
Yeah.
So there's a few more words that seem like they connect with what you shared from Mark Nepo just a page later. And I guess before I read, I just wanted to take a guess at it because you asked some strong questions like, why? Why do they have that joy? Why are they so connected and we are not? And there is something about the razor's edge of being present that is demanded when we're in a refugee camp, when we're ripped away from our home, where we're not encased in the comfort of home, that comfort that allows us to space out, to be distracted, to go to our addictions, to numb ourselves. So I just wanted to read a little bit about how he says that very thing. If wholeness is the reward for the sovereignty of the seer, as both Buber and Confucius suggest, then comfort is the reward for the sovereignty of the consumer. And comfort is the psychic tranquilizer that makes ignorance bliss, that keeps us from being informed by the whole. That's why it's handy to have a poet put together some learning material. That's gorgeous.
Yep.
That's gorgeous. And between your sharing, which was it seemed like such a direct relay from the sharing of the person you were describing knowing in Cottage Grove and their experience, and they shared with you, and then you shared with me, and somehow this vibrant core of your communication came through. It just came through. It's just the strength of that whole. There's a being informed by the whole that came through from your friend to you, to me. And it is so obvious to me, in contrast, how much of my life and so many of the interactions that I'm in, and you know, I'm embarrassed to say, but how much of my day am I in that kind of unconscious comfort zone? There's a tinglingness to what we're talking about now for me. I'm feeling, so these are good tears, and I don't know if I've shared with you or, you know, the book club folks this time around. I have a pretty easy access to a number of emotions, and especially being moved by what I call the implicit, that wholeness, actually. And it's very, very present for me. So I just wanted to reassure you that these are really good tears. I'm fine. Is there anything that you are sparked to share?
Well, yes, and it's more an adjunct in I want to say it might be an older book on trauma. I can't remember. And you may know the author. He apparently was someone who worked a lot in war-torn countries, a lot. And I don't remember the name, but I remember him telling a story, because it's all about how the body needs to process trauma, otherwise it stays. And again, an African story, being in some war-torn place. Actually, he talked a little bit, but he was contrasting the people who experience the trauma from the people who hear about the trauma. So you'd have the people in the horrid war-torn space, and then say the relatives who are so fearful. And he said the people in the war-torn place every morning spent maybe 2 hours drinking their coffee. And it was 2 hours because they get the beans and roast the beans and grind the beans and brew the beans and all that. And he said the whole time they were talking. You know, I envisioned people, you know, dirt and outside in a village, and they're doing this and what are they talking about? They're talking about how shitty the day before was, right? Because it's a war-torn place. And he said those people were in so much better shape than the people outside who were concerned about them, because they could not process it. And so what is that about? That's about human beings being together, talking, drinking coffee. And you're talking about holding space, but in some ways, the simplicity,
Yes.
the simplicity of being human beings together and facing whatever it is we face. Oh my God, it doesn't need experts if we can relearn
Yes.
something so simple.
Mm.
You know, so to me, that's hopeful. So when I get scared and spun out about the violence, and yet it might just mean if we could drink our coffee together and talk
Yes.
every morning.
Mm.
So enough said. Do we have one more chapter? I think
Oh,
maybe.
Judy, I can't just race on. Thank you so much. That is, I've I've become so jaded to the word hope. It's one of the scars that I carry from doing this work for so long, because it is used in a horrific way that I'm repulsed by.
Mhm.
It is something along the lines of, gee, I hope the experts take care of all these pesky problems so that we can get back to business and life as usual. I'm repulsed by that. I'm disgusted by that. I have immense judgments that I'm not proud of about that. And when I compare that to, you just use the word hope in what you were just describing, this vignette that you imagine of what if we were to have some kind of simple ritual in our little community. We get together for a couple hours each day and do this rustic generation of a drink that we can all drink. And that's really just an excuse for us to be together, to generate a very much a homespun, simple coherence in an organic way. And that coherence absolutely has the ability to diffuse and possibly even release and heal layers of traumatic residue in our systems. There's so much beauty in that.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. That was just, thank you. For the sake of anybody who's lucky enough to watch this recording for the book club, I'm going to also include some words from a very dear friend of mine who's also an author and a Chinese medicine healer, and also a facilitator at a remarkable level with the issues of embodied trauma. And so his name is Jack Adam Weber, and he has a book about how to process these extraordinary global scale existential issues. His book is called Climate Cure: Heal Yourself to Heal the Planet. And one brief excerpt, just a few paragraphs here, if I may. He calls it trauma informed versus trauma initiated. As anyone who has journeyed through their own recovery knows, you learn stuff down there in the dark, in the pain, that can't be learned in textbooks or even easily explained. It's lived experience, and it creates a web of wisdom that's so intricate and subtle that no one could ever truly know the territory unless they've had traveled it themselves. And it allows one to deeply show up for others on the embodied path. This is to be trauma initiated, in contrast with looking in from the outside as merely trauma informed. It changes the whole of you. It changes the whole of you cognitively, physically, and emotionally. The result is a deeply embodied spirituality. Going through the process, which begins in earnest when the heart cracks open and one courageously meets their backlogged pain that purges forth, is a practice in deep self-compassion and presencing. Because without them, there is no healing process. The alchemical ingredients for our healing lay in wait inside us. We just need the genuine care, co-regulation, and sacred partnership with an elder on the path to catalyze it. It's high time us wounded healers who have been through the flames and trained by gritty experience share our stories and presence with others who are starving for the trauma initiated and have been attunement starved by the merely trauma informed.
Mm.
So that's, I think, wise counsel from Jack. And I noted that it's kind of a multi-dimensional, multifaceted sharing that he's doing. I can certainly relate with it. And I just want to loop back to your sharing, Judy, about maybe we don't need experts. Maybe at our core, there is this simple attunement. There is this simple coherence that really wants to come forth. It wants to emerge in the space between us. And maybe there are simple activities we could do together if we ever spent time with each other face to face. That the simple engagement together in those simple ways, perhaps that coherence would emerge on its own. I'm saying it as a possibility. I'm saying it as a hope. So I'm using hope in a lilting way, in an appreciative way. I'm really honoring your reintroducing me to the word hope in a way that I don't mind saying it. And I don't mind setting aside my curmudgeonness. So,
I think hope has got a bad rap in this world. Now, I understand the hopium part of it, but why would we live without hope? You know, that is like beauty and all these other things.
yes.
So
Yeah.
do you remember, it was in the paper, could have been a few years ago now, the story of, and I can't remember if it was this country or Canada, but a youngish man, I think he was a veteran, and he started scoping out a mosque because he basically wanted to do violence there.
Hmm.
And that's why he would go in. In the end, he was converted because he was so welcomed. And so those initial scouting trips and the warmth and the love he felt. Now, I'm not talking about we should be converted to anything, but again, that humanity, he met humanity in this space where he went in with hatred. And again, I think there's so much room for hope. And I think part of my difficulty as I move into this space, the online groups, is when I hear people and where they seem to be, and they might be smiling. Okay, so I'm not saying they're all gloomy, but they're smiling when they can assert that a 2-year-old will not grow up. Well, you know, I know that poor kid's not going to survive. And I thought, well, one, you know nothing. You don't know how anything is going to play out. And to be in that space, whether you say it in a smile, you're living in such a dark space. And can't we find ourselves to the bright space? There are bright spaces.
Yes.
And to me, it's not like then people will say, and I walked outside and the moon was so beautiful. That still seems tragic because you know the moon won't be there for so long. And I wish we could genuinely be inhabiting the positive, the journey to center, I use faith, the faith journey. I mean, this is the reason that it has brought us here. And isn't there joy and compassion and companionship and all those things? Because we always were going to die in the end. Always. You know, but nothing has changed about that. We were always going to die.
Yes.
And that's what I'm looking for help with, to
Right.
be constantly reminded, and maybe being a person who can remind others.
Right. I think you have crossed over a bridge that is essential, certainly in this body of work that I'm engaged in. I believe that you have crossed over from the really the irresponsible use of the word hope attached to, and said with a sneer by the people who, the hopium judgment people, have no use for the word hope because it so often is attached to what I was saying before, this, I hope the experts take care of this pesky problems so we can get back to life as usual, comfort life that has kept us from being present. And I believe that the bridge you have stepped over and shared with us about is the bridge that implies letting go of that business as usual, you return to business as usual hope. And instead, it seems like you're using the word hope to be, is it possible? Could we hope for a return to vivid presence, that I am so present in this moment? I am present to the miracle. I'm literally softening my eyes right now as I'm looking at you on the screen, and I'm bringing forth as best I can this coherence right now as I'm saying these words. Could we establish a new way of being with one another in which we are so present so much of the time that we have a rich intimacy with one another instead of a polarized distance, the painful distance? We have a moment by moment opportunity that is absolutely within our reach every moment. Whether we actually do that, I don't know, it's possible every moment. But we have enough of those simple tools in our beingness that we make those choices to become that present with one another, that we are moved by the presence of another. Or we're alone and we're moved by this moment, the miracle that is this moment. That's what I hear you pointing to with the word hope. I hope we can return to some amount of access to the miracle of each moment, that which will burst us out in tears if we let it. That is a rich, love-infused wholeness, rather than a despair, compressed environment in which we're disconnected from one another, desperately disconnected from one another. And that is the essence of what we're inviting in this space of living resilience. And it is available to us all every moment. But the wisdom traditions throughout the millennia have told us it takes some work to desaturate from that comfort, that encasement, and to really focus, really make it our work, our inner work, to bring ourselves to that focus.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not letting go of comfort, it's redefining. This is definitely an aside. I had moved where I am. I bought my dad's house when he died, so I relocated to my hometown. And I was probably a year here, single woman, knowing I could do whatever I wanted. And under the Tuscan sun, remember that from years ago, older woman's Bible. So gosh, would I like to travel? Like, would I like to go overseas and, buy a house and, that whole thing, right? You're living the dream, whatever this dream is. And I was having this reverie. I had a book and I was I have a lot of seating areas in my backyard, which is not a big yard. And I was sitting in one place in this sun with a cup of tea and reading a book. And then I had this reverie. And I thought, yeah, I could do that. I could afford to swing that. And I could move to a place like Tuscany, and I could buy the house, and I could fix it up, and I could find the hot Italian lover, right? The whole thing. And what would I be doing there? I would be sitting in the sun outside, reading a book, drinking tea. I am living the dream. And it just took it all away. I am living the dream now in my backyard. And I just thought that was the funniest thing. I had the comfort. I had the dream. It was present in the moment. And it's a silly story, but I think it's a true story.
Yeah. Judy, it has just been an absolute joy to be with you in this conversation today. It feels so palpable and like a warm dose of sunshine and in that garden to be in this conversation with you. And I really appreciate it. This is why I was hoping to find some connection with the work of Mark Nepo, to kind of nudge us toward that center with each other. And you have just made it so vivid today, time and time again, with your sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just the two of us.
And I hope you will give it some thought to connect with perhaps some of the collateral beauty course might be a good place to start. And if you're interested in checking out our community of practice, which is a very different kind of we have the weekly support group, drop-in support group kind of environment called Safe Circle, but it's not nearly as in-depth and with as much continuity as what we're experiencing here. And the next level still is the community of practice, experiential support group that we run here on Wednesdays. And if you'd ever like to, come meet folks and get a sense of it, and I think you would be an extraordinary fit. You just got a real, a clear set of roots into this path, into this extraordinary possibility of worthy of hoping for, of being significantly more present in each moment, and the intimacy and the beauty that's present when we do that. So that's my long-winded way of inviting you to come check it out if you'd like.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. But I will look forward to seeing you next Saturday.
Great.
And we're out of time. We are.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. For me too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us in another episode of The Poetry of Predicament. This podcast is produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance. Living Resilience exists to offer transformative support and resources to the collapse-aware and collapse-acceptant communities around the world. Our sole purpose is to curate and offer coaching, support groups, courses, and events that assist people in expanding their core skills, competencies, and capacities for facing a troubled, predicament-laden, yet still ineffably miraculous world.